If you can believe it, the playoffs start tomorrow. Ravens and Steelers matching up in prime time under the lights. But the whole notion of playoff Lamar Jackson is being massively overblown. We talk about Mike Florio and others disrespecting playoff Lamar Jackson, as well as some pretty wild Eddie Jackson and Baltimore Ravens split details being revealed. A lot of that and more coming up next here on Locked On Ravens.
You are Locked On Ravens, your daily Baltimore Ravens podcast. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Welcome into another edition of Locked On Ravens, your daily Baltimore Ravens podcast. I'm your host, Kevin Ostreicher of Ravens Wire, here with you on the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. Thank you so much for being here on this Purple Friday. One day, one sleep before the Ravens take on the Pittsburgh Steelers in the Wild Card round. We're here on the Locked On Podcast Network, and we're free and available for you on all podcasting platforms, including in video form on YouTube, where you can like and subscribe. Also in audio form, where you can follow along and subscribe as well. And today's episode of Locked On Ravens is brought to you by PrizePicks. Go to PrizePicks.com/LockedOnNFL and use code all lowercase LockedOnNFL to win $50 instantly when you play $5. Sam Njoku of Ravens Talk Podcast is in the house with us today. And Sam, man, it feels so crazy that we are officially in playoff mode. I know you and I have talked about it all season. This season is flying by extremely fast. And now you get round 3 between the Ravens and Steelers. We talked about this over the last couple of weeks. Who would we prefer? Chargers, Texans, Steelers. The Steelers are pretty low on our list, but you know what? It's here, it's happening, and in order to be the best, you got to beat the best, and I think this is probably the best team the Ravens going to face off against in the first round of the playoffs.
Yeah, man, one day away from the playoffs. I am cautiously optimistic about this game. I did not want to play the Steelers a third time. If you're a Ravens fan, that's probably makes a lot of sense. They just know you better. The familiarity is always there. Why give it another game for them to get even more familiar? But as we mentioned, the Chargers are probably the better matchup for them. But with Zay Flowers out, I don't know. I feel like maybe this is the better game because you know the run game will be dominant in this game. Prominent is probably the better word, but both of these teams loving to run the football. So we'll see what happens.
Yeah, it's just that uncertainty factor, I feel like, when you play a team that you know well and then they know you well. It's that, oh, well, we're going to try to pull one over on them. Well, wait, they know we're going to do that already. So it's a little bit more of you got to dive a little deeper into that bag, or maybe the vault. If you want to go back to the Greg Roman days, you got a little bit of that too. So we'll see how it all unfolds. But obviously, Sam, one of the big storylines is Lamar Jackson in the postseason. A 2-4 record. He has not played up to standard. I think we can all agree on that. But I think he's getting a little too much criticism for his playoff performances when in reality, look, Lamar's done stuff to lose them playoff games. I'm not going to sit here and say Lamar is absolved from all playoff criticism because he's not. But he went for 500 total yards in that Tennessee game. Some of his playmakers were injured in the 2019 divisional round. The Ravens went away from who they were in that game. Still a couple tough plays from Lamar, but regardless. You know, that Bills game, he had the tough interception. He got injured. That was a weird game overall in Buffalo. And, you know, he got revenge the next season on Tennessee, or at least he was able to go back to Tennessee, get revenge on them in that game. And hey, Lamar wins a playoff game. He gets that chip off of his shoulder, but obviously people see the loss to Kansas City in the AFC Championship game last year, Sam, as the big, oh, well, look at this. He can't do it. But again, it's like the Ravens ran their running back 6 times. Yes, Lamar, that throw to Isaiah Likely in the triple coverage probably wasn't the throw I would have made. But again, I'm not Lamar Jackson, but people just throw that Texans game under the rug and say, oh, well, hold on, Lamar had a good playoff game. No, we're not. We have agendas to push. We're not going to talk about that. And so Mike Florio, or Mike Flores, whatever you want to call him, he went in on playoff Lamar Jackson, saying Lamar Jackson has a history of failing in the postseason. When Lamar Jackson tries to talk his way out of his history, he only puts more pressure on himself. And then kind of talked a little bit about how, you know, situationally, in these games, Lamar's going to feel some pressure. You know, he says, oh, no, you're not, because when you go out there for the first drive of the game and that's when they're going home, you're favored by 9.5 points, you'll feel the pressure. Oh, yes, you will. Talk about how that narrative doesn't go away until you make it go away. And that narrative is always going to be putting pressure on you. I just don't feel like Sam, yes, he deserves criticism for his playoffs, but this level of it, I just feel like we're getting a little bit out of hand.
They're getting a little crazy with it. It's kind of annoying, honestly. Yes, Lamar Jackson has struggled in the postseason, but you got to remember, you mentioned it a little bit, Before that Texans game, the Ravens hadn't had Lamar Jackson for a playoff game since 2021 against the Buffalo Bills. Since then, injured, finally got a chance against the Texans. So really, he hasn't had but one loss in over 3 years in the playoffs, and that's the AFC Championship game, where that huge mistake thrown in triple coverage, I think, is the one glaring flaw in his overall decent performance. Now, as far as Lamar Jackson failing in the AFC Championship game, again, this offense is predicated on running the football. There's not a lot of schemes that the Ravens possess where they can just go out slinging it 40 times in the game and expect to win. They set up their offense best when running the football and then setting up all the things that come with it, with Lamar running it, with the play action, bootlegs, all of that good stuff. So I think a lot of it is overblown for sure. Again, the narrative is made for by the media. I mean, nobody in the other facilities, Pittsburgh, Buffalo, Kansas City, thinks that Lamar struggles in the postseason. It's a media thing. But Lamar, all he has to do is go out there, follow the game plan, get the wins, rack them up, and then the chips will fall where they may.
Yeah, and it just feels like with all of the struggles Lamar has had, and they're real, they've been there in the postseason, it's like the successes have been almost just like pushed down, and you only hear about the failures. And that, honestly, Sam, is why I believe he has to win a Super Bowl in order to kind of get this stuff off of him. And even then, I don't know if it's going to ever go away, because let's say Lamar goes out there, Sam, he dominates Pittsburgh. And then let's say the Ravens and the Bills match up, and then they dominate the Bills. Obviously, a lot of pressure if the Ravens play Kansas City in the AFC Championship game, and that's going to be a bigger conversation, not only for Lamar, but for the Ravens and the Chiefs, having the Chiefs be their kryptonite. But even if Lamar makes the Super Bowl and he loses it, everybody's going to say, oh, Lamar lost the Super Bowl. He can't win the Super Bowl. And we're just like, wait, we saw growth. Like, we saw him play well in the playoffs. What are you talking about? And that's the conversation. That's just a general overarching thing of the discourse surrounding Lamar Jackson, as you mentioned it, Sam, by some national media. And even Nick Wright, who we know has been low on Lamar Jackson, low on the Ravens in the past, and honestly still currently, said like, hey, look, a lot of great athletes, a lot of the greatest we've ever seen, get tight in big spots. He mentioned Peyton Manning in his argument, and I know that Lamar and Peyton have been kind of compared to one another over the years in terms of their success and getting over that playoff hump. But he ended up saying that he doesn't feel like Lamar is going to ever like be great in the postseason. Essentially, he said that he feels like he'll win a championship, but not to the level of like, oh, he's going to just dominate and run through everybody. He essentially compared it to LeBron having that like turn it on play. Because remember, the conversation around LeBron was he's a playoff choker, can't get the job done, yada, yada, yada. Then he had that big, I think it was Boston, he had that big moment, and he just took off from there. Nick Wright doesn't believe Lamar's going to have that moment, but he mentioned, oh, well, if you're antsy, you're admitting that you're antsy. And I thought it was big of Lamar to kind of admit that and say, hey, I understand why I'm having these moments and why these issues are happening. But he said he'd be surprised if the Ravens would get to 24 points. And Chris Broussard went off. He's like, what are you talking about? And he's like, look at the history. And this is what I agree with, Sam. Chris Broussard was like, we're talking about this year. We're talking about this year. Yes, past playoff failures have happened, but why are we discrediting what this offense has looked like this season? Sure, it's a different season from regular season to playoffs. I'm not trying to say, oh, it's the same exact thing, but even when he talks about low passing yard totals in the playoff games, which, yeah, sure, he hasn't thrown for a bunch of yards in the postseason every single game, it's his impacts against Houston, against Tennessee the second time around that has helped him win those playoff matchups.
Yeah, Nick's a hater. Nick's a Kansas City Chiefs fan, so of course he's going to try and lower the discord when it comes to that. I'm sure. I think I saw a segment where he said he's more concerned with the Bills than the Ravens, which is nuts in my opinion, but that's neither here nor there. Yeah, I get the discord. I get the narrative against Lamar Jackson, but when it comes down to it, he's the best quarterback in the league right now. He's the best quarterback left in the postseason right now, playing as well as he has. I guarantee you the Ravens are going to be scoring points in this game. This offense is just too good. Too many things to go against him. And if you're looking at the past with Lamar Jackson, you got to remember, he's never had Derrick Henry. He's never had another running threat. A lot of teams in the past can just focus on Lamar when it comes to the run. Leave Gus Edwards, leave J.K. Dobbins to get their 3 or 4 yards if you got to make sure that Lamar's not breaking the big run. Can't do that anymore with Lamar Jackson. You got Derrick Henry out there. He's the focal point of this rushing attack now, not Lamar Jackson. And that's why it's going to be different in this time around and for the foreseeable future, as long as Derrick Henry's wearing purple, because he's a monster. He's almost had 1,900 yards. He was about 80 yards away from getting to 2,000 yards. A lot of people don't talk about that. It's going to be a very serious task for these defenders in Pittsburgh or whoever faces the Ravens next in the divisional round to stop this team because they're so dominant in offense.
So you are not worried about Lamar Jackson wilting when it comes to the playoffs or wilting down?
Not at all. I think that Lamar is going to show out this season. There are matchup concerns later down the line with a couple of teams. I think the Chiefs possess a definite matchup problem with the Ravens offensive line interior with Chris Jones. I think that's an issue, but anyone else in the postseason for the Ravens, there's no matchup concerns with this offensive line, which is going to be the reason the Ravens win or lose a championship.
Yeah, O-line is going to be massive. We're going to talk about that a little bit in the third part of the show, and we dive into the Ravens and Steelers preview. But coming up in the second part of the show here, we're going to talk about the Ravens' defensive turnaround a little bit, how that is going to help them across their postseason run, and also some pretty wild Eddie Jackson details were revealed about why he is no longer with the Ravens. So be sure to stay tuned. A lot to get to on Locked On Ravens. This is a message from our sponsor, Intuit TurboTax. Are you tired of the endless waiting, wondering, and worrying about your taxes? Well, now that's a thing of the past. You see, taxes don't need to be complicated or stressful. TurboTax is here to change the game by matching you with a TurboTax expert who can get to work on your return right away. No more waiting for answers. No more wondering if you're missing out on deductions, whether you've got one form or 20. TurboTax experts give your taxes their undivided attention while you get real-time updates on their progress so you can focus on what really matters. You won't have to lift a finger, but you'll get the peace of mind knowing that your taxes are being handled by the pros. Ready for stress-free taxes and the most money back guaranteed? Head over to TurboTax.com today and get matched with your expert who's ready to take your taxes off your plate so you can focus on your day. Only available with TurboTax Live full service real-time updates only in the iOS mobile app. See guaranteed details at TurboTax.com/guarantees. And the show is brought to you by PrizePicks. It's playoff time, and if you're like me, you want to make the most of these final weeks of football action. That's where PrizePicks comes in. If you love football and want a chance to win real money while watching the games, PrizePicks is the place for you. It's the best way to turn your sports opinions into cash with daily fantasy player projections. With PrizePicks, simply pick more or less on player stats like total passing yards or rushing touchdowns for a shot to win up to 1,000 times your money. You can make your picks in less than 60 seconds, whether you're looking for a flex play to boost your payout or want to cash out quickly. PrizePicks has got you covered with over 10 million members and billions in winnings. It's clear that people are loving this platform. I've been playing for a while now, and I'm having a blast this week. I'm buying Lamar Jackson, more than 230 passing yards, and Derrick Henry for more than one touchdown. It's so easy to use, and I love how fast the payouts are. I've gotten paid out in as little as 15 minutes when my picks hit. Plus, with weekly promos like Taco Tuesday discounts add even more value to my lineups. Here's a special offer for Locked On NFL listeners. Down the app today, use code Locked On NFL to get $50 instantly after you play your first $5 lineup. Down the app today, use code Locked On NFL to get $50 instantly after you play your first $5 lineup. PrizePicks, run your game. Locked On Ravens, Kevin Oestreicher, Sam Njoku, still rocking out with you here on this Purple Friday. 1 day away from the Ravens officially beginning what will hopefully be a very long playoff run. I would be very disappointed and sad if that is not the case. But you play the games to win them, Sam. There's going to be a winner and a loser. Hopefully Baltimore can just string up. All you're asking for, Sam, is just to add on to this win streak. Just 4 more wins. You know, you can split it up. Imagine how good that would feel, too. 8-game win streak across the regular season and the playoffs, especially if they're able to do it in a dominant fashion. So we're going to be looking out for all of that. And the way that they can do that is if their defense can continue to play the way that they have over the course of the last really month and a half. And one thing that they did, Sam, obviously we talked about the run defense all season. It's been great. There's been no issues with the run defense. It was the secondary that was really that contention point. Are they ever going to turn it around? And they absolutely have. Kay Adams on her show, the Up and Adams show, put together a great graphic of how drastic this defensive turnaround has been. So weeks 1 through 10, scoring defense, the Ravens were 25th, total defense, 27th, pass defense, 32nd, third down percentage, 30th, red zone defense, tied for 20th, opposer passer rating, 26th. You look through weeks 13 to 18, Sam, First. Everything first. They were the best defense in every category, or at least most every category, over the last handful of weeks of the season. One of the ways they did that was they changed around their secondary. Ardarius Washington goes in. Marcus Williams, Eddie Jackson go out. Nate Wiggins has been awesome. They've had plenty of other contributions. But with Eddie Jackson, Jess Rebeck at The Athletic had an article that came out which detailed some pretty wild Eddie Jackson details, talking about how Jackson was benched and he ended up being released after his frustration boiled over with an outburst at Zach Orr in front of players and coaches. Sam, we know the Ravens don't mess with that. We know they don't play that game. That happens, you're out of there. They're not going to take any chances of that locker room being fractured. Did it kind of shock you to hear that Eddie Jackson did this and essentially made it not just his personal problem, but he made it an entire organizational problem with how it kind of was conducted, according to Jeff?
Doesn't surprise me because I've heard some rumblings about what went down with that with Eddie Jackson. I'm very happy that the Ravens responded the way they did. It just goes to show you what type of locker room John Harbaugh has instilled in Baltimore. So definitely like the way the Ravens went about it. We talked about all the things that happened in the past with the Ravens with mutiny and then the conversations with them with Ed Reed and Ray Lewis and yada, and how John Harbaugh has grown since then. He's definitely brought into this locker room. He's okay with the personalities. I think a lot of things that Ravens fans think, oh, John Harbaugh does like soft guys because he doesn't like to be challenged. That's not the case. It's just a matter of respect and accountability. Those are the two words that we hear John Harbaugh echo lots and lots of times. So I think it was a big deal for the Ravens. They made that switch and adjustment. They got tired of the nonsense with Eddie Jackson. And now you're seeing a defense that is prospering with new faces and new places. And the sky's the limit. You mentioned it. They're first in almost every category. And with the way this offense is playing, that's one thing that's being kind of swept under the rug a little bit. The Ravens offense is helping this defense out a lot because they're playing not to allow the big play. And when you're up by 7, 10, 14 points, you need the big play to come back, and you're playing right into the Ravens' hands. So as long as the Ravens continue to play this style of football on both sides of the ball, they're going to be a tough out.
Yeah, and look, essentially when you have a new cornerback one and Michael Pierce, you're unstoppable. You're unstoppable, and you got Michael Pierce dropping back in coverage and picking off passes. I think that's a Super Bowl ticket in its own right. But in all honesty, I mean, you have a bunch of graphics, Sam, and a bunch of stats that have come out over the last couple of days. One of them being that from the 33rd team, the lowest passer ratings allowed when lined up at outside cornerback, Marlon Humphrey, number 1 in the league at 51.7. Number 2, might surprise you, maybe not, Nate Wiggins, 56.3. Those two have been a dynamic duo this season. And look, I know a lot of people kind of lined up the Nate Wiggins pick with, oh, this might be Marlon's last season and they're planning for the future. Obviously, I think that has shifted with the year that Marlon has had. There's no way he's getting let out of that building. In fact, extension talk might be on the way for Marlon with everything that he's done. But that's one of the big things where we talked about some of the breakdowns that they had communicatively. And you've been on this show for a while, Sam, and you've been very clear in your point that you didn't believe this was a big Zach Orr problem. This was just about them getting their X's and O's down, being more communicative, and getting the players out that weren't contributing. And you've been firm on that the entire season. And here we are talking about this defense that turned it around because they made personnel changes. They got back to what it was. So again, Zach Orr faced a lot of criticism during the season. We talked about it on this show. Zach Orr was not perfect, but I do think he was overly criticized for what happened. But look, that criticism, the praise has to be as loud as the disrespect was. And I cannot say enough good things about Zach Orr over the course of this last couple month stretch.
What a first year for Zach Orr. I mean, turmoil, all of that stuff that goes with it, the transition from Mike McDonald to himself and what he's done for this defense cannot be overstated. You're right. I mean, it was a player issue. Players were echoing it in the locker room. Players were echoing it in secret at random just to let you know this is not a Zach Orr issue. And now we're talking about perhaps next year, if this continues, Zach Orr is allowed for a head coaching job. I mean, this is what he's done. He's been such a prominent head. The players love him. And you're right. It's all about communication with the Ravens. That's always what it's been. And you cannot have communication issues on the back end. The defensive line, sure. Linebackers, fair. But back end with your safeties, it's disastrous. And you saw it in that Bengals game. It was a straw that broke the camel's back. And since that game, the Ravens have been on fire. I said it before. I'll say it again. With the way this offense is playing and the way the back end of this defense is playing, they're going to be a tough out.
Yeah. And the big thing, one more thing on Eddie Jackson, by the way, how could you have an outburst when you drop like 3 interceptions in a game?
I don't know.
Like look, you and I talked about this. I am of the belief, and I truly do believe it, Eddie Jackson's performance against the Browns was one of the worst defensive performances I've ever seen in a game in Ravens history. He was awful the entire game, dropped interceptions, blown coverage assignments, missed tackles. He was the main reason why they lost. Was he the only reason? Obviously not. We're not going to blame it all on one player. But to say, oh, I want more playing time, or whatever the conversation was, it wasn't detailed in anything, so I'm not going to put words in his mouth. But like to have the outburst that he had, he wasn't playing well. It'd be one thing if he was playing well, he didn't think he was getting enough playing time. It's like, okay, that's one thing. Still not like acceptable, but at least you can understand the reasoning behind it. You're not going to go out there and just have an outburst and say, oh, well, this isn't going well. And I don't like this. I don't like that. When you're having the year that you're having for Eddie Jackson. So that to me, Sam, I didn't understand. Are you on the same page with me on that? Or do you feel like it was like, oh, okay, you kind of understand?
No, I understand completely. And the reason why Eddie Jackson was upset was because he felt like he was getting all the blame for the Ravens' misfortunes. And that's literally what it was. And he just did not feel like he was supposed to be getting all that blame. He thought that it wasn't just him that was causing issues, yada, yada, yada. And that's how it spilled over. So I think that, I don't get why he was upset. I mean, it's clear as day if you watch the film that he was missing tackles, missing assignments, dropping interceptions that would have shifted the momentum and just pretty much sealed the game. But yeah, it's just one of those things. And he's got into it with some fans too, online with other fans about his performance and all of that. So all of that just let me believe that the psyche wasn't there for him. He wasn't really feeling it with this team. And good for the Ravens for moving on from him. Marcus Williams, another guy who struggled a little bit, but he's still on the team. He's owning it. He's accepting the situation, knowing that there's a chance he could be brought back in if there's an injury or if they decide to shift the philosophy a little bit. So the difference between Eddie Jackson and Marcus Williams cannot be overstated. I think that a lot of fans need to understand the situation with Eddie Jackson completely different with what went down with Marcus Williams.
Yeah, and Marcus is a good dude. I mean, I had him on this show a couple of years ago when he first came to Baltimore, and he's a very down to earth guy. And look, for Eddie Jackson, I will say, yeah, should he have been getting all the blame? No, I mean, again, it's not a one player thing, but if his mindset was, why am I getting all this blame? What am I doing? Come on, like, come on. That's a little bit different. And obviously you mentioned Marcus, Sam. He and the Ravens agreed on a contract restructure. Obviously it's pretty apparent he's not going to be back with the team next season. And the Ravens actually got a little bit of cap relief because that's going to be a decently big chunk of money they're moving off of. So what ends up happening is the Ravens will now have $9.9 million in cap space available to them at the start of free agency. Marcus helping the Ravens out there a little bit, but the Ravens are going to have their hands full a little bit more than they did the last time these two teams played because George Pickens obviously was not available for that game, and you could certainly feel his absence. Pickens is a great player, but I think the conversation around the Ravens right now, Sam, in defending the Steelers offense, particularly in the past game, has been Brandon Stephens. And Brandon Stephens had a lot of words thrown at him from former Ravens players, Jimmy Smith, Marcus Spears, Kadri Ismail came on this show and talked about Brandon Stephens too, is essentially like he has to be able to turn his head around for the ball, which is not news to anybody. But Pickens is one of the best at flashing those late hands. And when you flash those late hands, Stephens and corners are looking for a cue from the wide receiver to get your head around. And for a guy that already can't get his head around very well, if Pickens is giving you those late hands, and we have seen this in action against the Ravens, Pickens has done this. Pickens being back is big. Calvin Austin's a really big threat for them. Freiermuth you got to worry about as well. Do you feel like Baltimore will be able to continue their strong secondary stretch against this Pittsburgh offense? Because let's be honest, Sam, Pittsburgh's looked terrible this last month.
Yeah, they look bad, man. And yeah, they got some weapons. Pickens obviously is an upgrade over what they had in their second meeting, but man, they are looking terrible on offense. And their philosophy is dink and dunk or go big. And that's been their entire offense the entire year. And with the weather the way it's looking like, with the winds, I don't know if they even have the deep ball to go to. I mean, if he throws those moon balls up to George Pickens, and I'm pretty sure at times the Ravens will have at least some safety help up top to help with Brandon Stephens, that can be a turnover situation waiting to happen for Pickens. So I think this Steelers team will continue to run the football, be that team to try and ground and pound, and then use it to set up the play action and get Russell Wilson outside to make some throws. But man, I don't know that offense, even with those guys, will struggle a little bit because this secondary one is built to stop the big play, and that's what the Steelers love to do. And also they have some guys in the flats, and they're stop the throws in the flats. We saw it with Marlon Humphrey, and stopping the run, Roquan Smith and company, Michael Pierce. Those guys are dogs out there. They're the best in the league at stopping the run. So a lot of matchup concerns for the Steelers heading into this one, and that's pretty much why that spread is probably so large.
Yeah, and look, the Steelers don't have a good run game at all. I mean, Najee Harris has been pretty disappointing over the course of his last couple of years in Pittsburgh, and Jaylen Warren has given them a little issue. The Ravens, Jaylen Warren's had some moments against Baltimore, but they're 25th in the league in yards per attempt. Baltimore, as you mentioned, Sam, they're the best run defense in the league. I mean, they are so good at stopping the run, and when you take that away and you let the Ravens play a little bit more free, that allows the pass rushers to essentially just go into pass rush mode and are able to feed into that a lot more. Kyle Van Noy, obviously, Adafe Owe, they're going to have big games from those guys. On the interior, you would love to see a big Nnamdi Madubuike, Travis Jones game. I want a Michael Pierce interception every week. I'm not satisfied until Michael Pierce gets an interception every single week. Put him at corner. I don't care. I want to see Michael Pierce pick that football up because that, to me, is the best interception in NFL history. It is not even close. So coming up in the final part of the show, we're going to dive into a little more of Ravens Steelers preview, talk about predictions for the game, and some keys for both teams. Stay tuned. Got a lot coming your way on Locked On Ravens. First, the show is brought to you by FanDuel. From big upsets to game-winning drives, the NFL playoffs are better with FanDuel because right now, new customers can bet $5, get $200 in bonus bets guaranteed. That's $200 in bonus bets, win or lose. The FanDuel app gives you everything you need for live bets, same-game parlays, and so much more. And so for this Ravens and Steelers game, Ravens open up as 9.5-point favorites. So if you like the Ravens as home favorites, the Steelers as road underdogs, be sure to pick your side over at FanDuel. Just visit FanDuel.com to join today and get started with $200 in bonus bets. That's FanDuel.com. Make this playoff season unforgettable with FanDuel, official sports partner of the NFL. Kevin Allstriker, Sam Njoku, still rocking out with you here on Locked On Ravens. Be sure to hit that like and subscribe button in video form and follow along in audio form for 5 days a week, plus more of daily Ravens coverage. We'll be live after the game here on Locked On Ravens, about 15 minutes or so after the game. Win or lose, if we win, we're going to have a big celebratory stream. Ravens win equals celebratory stream. Ravens loss equals, we're going to go through it together. We're going to go through it together. It's going to be a time. We always try to have fun on Locked On Ravens, but let's be honest, playoff losses are never fun. Those are never fun. So hopefully the Ravens can get the job done. And Sam, one of the reasons that I feel like Baltimore is in good shape in this game is because Pittsburgh is just a terrible, terrible red zone offense. They're one of the worst red zone offenses in the league. They're one of the worst fourth down conversion teams in the league. We literally saw this live in action, by the way, the first time the Ravens and Steelers matched up, when Chris Boswell had to will that team to victory with 6 field goals. They could not get the ball in the red zone and kept Baltimore in the contest. Plus the fact that I feel like this game's going to come down to turnovers, if we're being honest. Whichever team wins the turnover battle will probably win this game. The Ravens lost the turnover battle the first time around. They lost the game. Second game, the Ravens had some incredible fumble luck. I wouldn't expect it to go that way again for them, but still, it worked out for them, and they ended up winning. Russell Wilson's a pretty high mistake quarterback, it feels like, over these last couple of seasons, and if you can get him in his head a little bit, I feel like that's a really big key for the Ravens coming out with a win. But it is, I have to mention it, the Steelers, they are the best turnover defense in the league this season. That's something you have to monitor as well. Yeah,
that defense, the ability to get turnovers definitely is of concern. The Ravens pretty much lost the turnover battle, like you mentioned, 3 turnovers, 1 fumble interception, I like to call it. Really shouldn't have been an interception, but whatever. But yeah, the turnover battle can sway this thing a little bit. Also penalties. The Ravens have had penalties in the stalled drives. Also on the other end with roughing the passer calls. So a lot of things can go the Steelers' way, perhaps. But again, as you mentioned, their red zone offense is terrible. The Ravens are great in the red zone. Give the Ravens a 10-point lead. This one's over. The Steelers cannot afford to let the Ravens have a 2-score lead because then it's Derrick Henry time. Then Adafe Owe and Kyle Van Noy do what they do best. Leave Kyle Hamilton back there, pick up the pieces. It's game over. So the Steelers need to do a good job of scoring early, keeping it close with the Ravens, and give their defense a chance to make the crucial turnover.
And that's my thing too. I mean, I'm totally on board with you because look, Ravens and Steelers defense, those are 2 great units. And I don't expect this game to be super high scoring. Like, I feel like the Ravens could kind of break this one open if the momentum plays go their way, but I don't feel that way against Pittsburgh, to where I just think if the Ravens get out to that big lead, like you mentioned, Pittsburgh does not have the offensive firepower to keep up. The way Pittsburgh wins this game, the way Baltimore loses, is if Pittsburgh can slop it up and just make it a really ugly game, especially on the offensive side of the ball for the Ravens, where it's getting pressure on Lamar, forcing him into quicker decisions, because Lamar, I think, has gotten a lot better at navigating through that. But when any quarterback's internal clock is sped up, it can create panic and confusion for anybody. This is not just a Lamar thing. It's happened to everybody. So with TJ Watt, Alex Highsmith, Nick Herbig, you got the interior with guys like Cam Hayward, Keanu Benton, Larry Ogunjobi. That's all big. But Sam, you mentioned in the first part of the show, the offensive line. And I want to dive more into that with you because one of the big keys for me is also whichever offensive line plays better probably wins this game. And you express confidence. Why do you feel confident in it?
I feel confident because I think if the Ravens get out to an early lead, it'll push the defense into the line of scrimmage perhaps and give Lamar Jackson more time to make plays. I think that there is some concern with the right tackle, Rosengarten. The Ravens previously have given him some chips and things of that nature with some eligible receivers. So tight end chips, running back chips, stuff like that to help against TJ Watt. Ronnie Stanley, as you mentioned, has had a solid game, but I remember that strip sack from Highsmith in the second meeting that really may have swung the momentum, but the Ravens hadn't recovered that football. So something to watch out for. But again, the game is going to be the interior of that line. Tyler Linderbaum does well against smaller defensive tackles, so he should be decent. Daniel Falele, Patrick McCarry, or Voorhees, depending, may switch him out again like they did in the meeting. Likely not, but something to look out for. Point is, if that interior line can get it together, they have a shot. But if the Steelers are able to project pressure with the loss of Zay Flowers, crunching the line of scrimmage more, getting 8 guys in the box, could cause some problems for that interior front. So it's up to the Ravens interior front to get it done. I am confident because they did play so well against them in Week 16, but it is the playoffs. Anything can happen. So if you're a Ravens fan, definitely something to look out for.
So you are all on board with the matchup for the most part. For you, it's just more the uncertainty of the division and that type of stuff. Yeah, I'm with you on that because I think that, again, the way that these two teams have trended, I mean, Baltimore has been incredible. They're on their big run. They've won 4 straight games. Pittsburgh is not even the on-the-field stuff, which, yes, they have not looked good. It's even off the field with like Patrick Queen calling out his team, Cam Hayward getting spicy, George Pickens has been George Pickens, which is not good when you talk about it in that sense of the word. So it just feels like there's a lot of it. It almost feels like to me, Sam, and you kind of take the pulse of the Steelers fan base right now. Feels like they think the season's over and that this is it. Like they do not have any confidence whatsoever. And then they're all just, all right, well, Tomlin should be fired, like that, and that conversation happens. So I want to round this out with a couple of fun/controversial topics for us today. First of all, we'll start with fun, then we'll get into controversials. We'll do that. Over, under. Let's say there's over, under on FanDuel on amount of 4th down plays the Ravens go for in this game. Maybe to get momentum, maybe risky. If I set it at 2.5, are you going over or under?
I'm going under. I think it's going to be, I think 2. I think 2 is the number. The defensive front makes them nervous enough where I think they may hold back a little bit. Now, if they're down or they're up or it's tight, like many expect, I could see them doing more 4th down conversions if the defense is doing a good job of holding Russell Wilson out. But I don't think they're going to need much 4th down conversions. I'm riding high on this Ravens offense against this defense. I think they'll be able to convert on 3rd down and keep things moving.
All right, now for the controversy. I want you to get ready for this one because I know you have a stance. If the Ravens lose this game, if it's a disappointing game or the same, they're one and done in the playoffs, do you feel like the Ravens should/would fire John Harbaugh?
That's a crazy
I told you,
one.
I told you, man. I told you to get ready. I told you to get ready.
Oh, man. I would say no. They want to get rid of John Harbaugh. His seat would be boiling hot, though. He'd be in tough waters with that. You can't lose against the Pittsburgh Steelers at home in the wild card when Super Bowl aspirations are still present. If you were the 4th seed, you're playing like the Texans, and then you're placed against the Steelers and you lose, maybe it's on the road. Maybe, yeah, that's tough. I would say because the way the Ravens have played so far this year, number 1 offense, all of that good stuff, the defensive surge, the way Steve Bisciotti loves John Harbaugh, I don't think you fire him, but his seat is boiling hot. You'll need a humongous 2025 season to overcome that. So yeah, this is the must-win game. Man, what a tough question. You're crazy.
Yeah, man. I told you it was gonna be a crazy question. Yeah, I feel like if it's more of the same, there has to be a really serious conversation about it because it's been that exact script for years now. And it's like the definition of insanity is doing the same thing over and over again and expecting different result. John Harbaugh is a great coach. I'm not going to sit here and say that he's not, but obviously sometimes things just run their course. And if they lose this game. We talked about last time these two teams played, Sam, you can't let the Steelers come in there and win the division on your home turf. I mean, it's even 10 times amplified now. You can't have the Steelers come in there and take the wild card round from you on your home turf. You have to make a statement. You have to play to your strengths. So we'll see how it all unfolds. But Sam, I appreciate you as always. Thank you so much for hopping on. Please tell people where they can find you and what you're working on here. Yeah, you can find me on YouTube at Ravens Talk Podcast. We have a new episode that just got released yesterday, so go ahead and check it out. You also find me on Apple Podcasts or Spotify. Find me on Twitter X at Ravens Talk Pod. We talk Ravens all the time. You can also find me on Instagram where we talk Ravens, and TikTok at Ravens Talk Podcast. Yeah, Sam does great work. Be sure to follow him. All the links in the description down below as always. Sam, thank you again. Hopefully we're talking next week after a playoff win, not a playoff loss, because I think we'd all be sad if that happened. But Ravens, Steelers, round 3, Saturday, coming up tomorrow. Crazy we're already at this point in the season. But that's all I have for you here today on Locked On Ravens. Thank you so much for tuning in. On the way out, hit that like and subscribe button in video form. Follow along in audio form. We'll be back here tomorrow with a pregame episode, 6 a.m. Eastern time. And then obviously after the game, we'll be reacting live, win or lose. Stay tuned here on Locked On Ravens. I'll see you right back here tomorrow on Locked On Ravens.